Good morning. I'd like to welcome you all to the first session on the last day of the PDC. Today, we're going to be talking about the Microsoft Dynamics Online Commerce and Payment API. Now, today we don't have a keynote, so I actually have a lot more responsibility. I don't have the spotlights, and I don't have the announcer, so I get to tell you to turn your cell phones off during the session. So you can go ahead and do that now. But I'd like to thank you all for coming. And I know it's early in the last day, so I appreciate you being here. We've heard a lot over the last few days about Windows Azure, about building applications that can run in the cloud and that can access data that we also store in the cloud. However, as a developer of business applications, there's one key problem that hasn't really been addressed. I might need access to data that's stored in my ERP solution. For example, Microsoft Dynamics AX, or NAV, or another one of the ERP solutions we offer. And there's a lot of complexity around accessing that data and interacting in business processes that happen in our ERP systems from the cloud or from a server or service that we host ourselves. My name is Adam Wilson, and I'm a program manager on the Microsoft Dynamics Online team. And today I really have two objectives for my session. I want to use a typical e-commerce scenario that I'll describe for you later to show an example of a business process that integrates with data from our ERP system and from other third parties. And we'll use this to look at some of the integration problems that exist and how the Dynamics Online API makes accessing that data and participating in those business processes easier for us as developers. The second key takeaway I hope you'll get from this session is that all of the APIs I show today don't just have to be used for e-commerce. They can be used to extend any business process that's happening in the client to happen in the cloud or in a service I write as well. So with that said, I'd like to get started and just show very briefly where we fit into the Azure stack here. We've seen this diagram a lot, and what we expose is a building block service, very similar to what you may have seen from CRM services. And instead of providing access to data in CRM, we provide access to data in a variety of different ERP systems. As I mentioned before, Dynamics Online is a service that Microsoft hosts. It's accessible through a SOAP API, which I'll describe later, and it accomplishes two key things. The first thing is it provides access to data that's stored in your ERP system. Think of this as a customer or a sales order. The second thing we do is we provide an abstraction to other providers. The two key abstractions we provide are around marketplaces. And a marketplace is something where you might list a product, such as eBay or Amazon, or a custom web store that either you've developed or a third party has developed. And the second abstraction we provide is payment processors. And again, this allows you to process a transaction. So through Dynamics Online, you can access data in your ERP system and use some of the services that also exist in your ERP system, such as payment processing. So now that we've looked at this, let's look at the e-commerce scenario. And I think that this will help to explain how this applies. So imagine we're a developer. We've been hired by Tailspin Toys, a mid-market retailer of toys for little kids. And they want to build a new web presence, tailspintoys.com. So as we think about them building this web presence, they're going to have to do a number of different integrations so that they can build this solution. The first integration they're going to have to do is with the ERP system of Tailspin Toys. Now, an ERP system, Enterprise Resource Planning, is the lifeblood of the company. This is where they store all of the financial and product and customer data that they use to operate their business. And in the context of an e-commerce solution, we need to be able to extract information about the products that Tailspin Toys sells, and then on the back end, be able to create orders for orders that customers have made on the website and reflect payments there as well. We also need to integrate into the fulfillment process that allows Tailspin Toys to ship their products and have this reflected through the e-commerce solution. Another integration we have to do is with a payment processor. And a payment processor is really just a communications channel between your solution and a merchant bank. A merchant bank has a merchant account for Tailspin Toys, perhaps already. This is the merchant account they might already use to process orders on the phone or do things through their ERP system. So likely, it's just integrating with something that Tailspin Toys already has. The third integration is with third-party marketplaces. And a marketplace brings together many buyers and many sellers. Think, for example, eBay or Amazon. Now, you may ask, if I already have Tailspin Toys, why do I need to integrate with eBay or Amazon? A lot of customers want to do multi-channel selling, where, for example, they take clearance items that didn't sell well, and they liquidate them on eBay through their efficient auction process. Or they find their highest margin items, and they list it on Amazon to expose it to a wider breadth of potential customers. In both of these cases, we need to integrate to push up listings to these marketplaces and download orders. So with each of these three parties that we might have to integrate with, Dynamics Online makes this easier by providing a common way to access the data and a common set of operations for interacting with these parties. So I want to look at the Dynamics Online architecture a little bit. At the very basic level, we have a series of connectors. And these connectors integrate with other third-party systems. We have ERP connectors, marketplace connectors, and payment connectors. In our initial release, we'll support Dynamics AX as our ERP system, eBay as our first marketplace connector, and we have 2 additional payment connectors I'll describe later. But the purpose here is to allow third parties to also plug these connectors into our system and to provide the functionality of another marketplace or another payment provider. And that's one thing a developer can do. On top of that, we have a data synchronization layer that ensures that the representations of data that we care about, our entities, is consistent between the external system and Dynamics Online. The particular entities that we expose are around catalog and catalog items, the products you sell and how you merchandise them. Listings, which are the representation of those catalog items on a marketplace. Orders, which are an order from a customer for a particular set of items. And payments. Our API is a SOAP API, and it's defined at a very low level. We define 4 operations on top of each of the entities we expose: create, read, update, and delete. And through these APIs, you can manipulate the entities in our system and have that synchronized back to these external systems as well. Finally, building on top of our own API, we've built a few pieces of UI that you can leverage as developers additionally. A catalog management UI, which allows you to take items and change how they're described or priced before you list them to a marketplace. And a payment UI, which allows you to configure your payment processing solution and to manage payment transactions. So now I want to go through a few of the details of how our catalog and catalog item entities work. So Dynamics Online provides one catalog for all companies in our system. It's called the master catalog. And this contains products that the company sells from their ERP system. So, for example, if you had a colored block and a portable TV item defined in your ERP system, this would synchronize up to Dynamics Online. So you can manipulate these items with the standard CRUD operations I described before, but we also provide a fairly flexible hierarchical catalog management system and inheritance among the catalog items. So for example, I could define a teacher catalog if I wanted to merchandise my items separately to educators than for kids. Or a clearance catalog if I wanted to group the items for clearance on eBay. And there's an API operation called add items to catalog, which will take an item and add it to a particular catalog. And by default, the values for all the attributes, such as name or price, are inherited from the master catalog to the catalog you created. However, we provide flexibility to allow you to override a particular attribute in a child catalog and break that inheritance. So for example, in this teacher catalog example, if I wanted to change the description to something that was more appropriate to inspire teachers to buy a product, let's say develop engineering skills at a young age for these colored blocks, I can change that through update catalog items on the child catalog and still maintain the same description on the master catalog. So for example, when I list to one marketplace for teachers, it would have the one description, and to other marketplaces, it would have the standard description. And again, if I change the pricing in my ERP system, it'll be reflected in the master catalog and also in all the child catalogs, because the inheritance for that attribute is still there. And I can do a similar sort of thing for the clearance catalog, changing the price and having all the other attributes continue to maintain their inheritance. So once I've gone through the process of creating catalog items and creating catalogs that are those representations of those items for publishing on marketplaces, let's look at how we take an item and get it up to a marketplace. So the marketplace provider, just to define this terminology, is the party that implements the functionality of the marketplace. They provide the integration between Dynamics Online and the marketplace itself. We ship out of the box, as I mentioned before, eBay. So we wrote this marketplace provider. But any developer, if you build web stores for companies, or if you work for Amazon out there, you could implement a marketplace provider for your particular marketplace. And it would be surfaced through our API. So if I have a catalog item with these attributes, I can go ahead and create a listing through an operation called publish catalog items. And what that does is two things. First of all, it does a mapping between the attributes defined on our standard catalog item entity to the attributes on the listing entity. This mapping is defined by the marketplace provider. It can be something as simple as an identity mapping, where you take the value of one and map it directly to the value of another, or it can be something more complicated. It can also involve both standard attributes that we define in our system and custom attributes, which are defined by a marketplace provider and represent additional functionality required to list to that marketplace. Now, a marketplace provider that defines custom attributes will have those exposed through our API, and as you'll see later, those will also be exposed in our UI as well. So throughout the entire stack, if you implement a new property for eBay called Fancy Border, which actually on eBay it does exist, and it's the border around an item, and you can give that a default value of false. If someone through the API creates a listing for eBay without that, it takes the default value. But they can also specify that fancy border on the catalog item, and it will be mapped as well. So now that we've looked at this process of publishing a catalog item from our standard model to a listing model, which is used on marketplaces, I just want to go through again the two steps of the process involved in implementing a marketplace provider, because I'm going to show this later. First thing we do, if, for example, we wanted to build a marketplace provider for tailspintoys.com, is we configure the descriptors. And this is the metadata about my marketplace. The custom attributes I use, the shipping information, the categories. So that gets configured with Dynamics Online. And then I implement a service contract, a marketplace provider service contract. And this is what's going to be called by the Dynamics Online marketplace connector every time someone, either through our API or through our UI, calls to create a listing on your marketplace. And this can be something that's very trivial, or it can be complicated. It could just add something to a database, or it could do additional logic and call other services. And it runs on your own server, or you can host it in the cloud, and we call it through a SOAP interface. So at this point, I want to jump into a demo. And I want to show exactly how all of this works. OK, so we're going to start off in Microsoft Dynamics AX. And this is one of the ERP systems we support through our ERP connector mechanism. And you can see here that Tailspin Toys has 11 items that they sell. And our ERP connector synchronizes this data up to the cloud. You can schedule it to be done, but just for instant gratification, we have a sync items button that allows you to sync this right away. So when I hit sync items, what that's going to do is, first of all, prompt me for Windows Live ID credentials. We use Windows Live ID to authenticate users of our API. And this can either be an interactive user, so for example, someone at Tailspin Toys, or it can be your service, right, your application that uses our API as well. OK. So what I want to show you now is that catalog management UI that I showed, that I talked about before. And I want to show this to you just so you understand what's available in our UI and how, if you implement a marketplace provider, this gets plugged in. So we have a variety of different tabs at the top. One is for item management. So I'm just going to refresh this by hitting F5. Oh, and this security warning is just because I'm hosting my images on HTTP, if you're wondering what that is. So here we can see that all of the items I sold in AX have now been synchronized to the cloud. And they're available there for you to interact with. So I just want to take a few of these items and copy them to a catalog. And I'll create a new catalog here called PDC. OK. So now that we have these items in a catalog, I can go off and publish them. And I'll show you first how to do it through the API. And then later on, I'll show you how to first through the UI. And then later on, I'll show it through the API as well. So I'm going to select all of these items here and click Publish. And I can select eBay or tailspintoys.com, which is the marketplace provider that we would implement for that particular custom web store. And I'll show you the code behind that in a second. So I hit Publish here. And what's being done is that our marketplace provider is going off and actually creating these listings on eBay. I have another tab here, which is the eBay seller account that I've previously configured with Tailspin Toys. And this shows the list of all the active items that I'm selling. And if I hit F5, what we're going to see is the 3 items that I previously published. And if you go through there, you can notice that the pricing information is the same that's been pulled up from AX. I could have customized it, but I didn't. And all of the descriptions are there as well. So now I want to go into Visual Studio and show you just a little bit of the code behind the tailspintoys.com marketplace provider. So what I've done is I've just built a simple ASP.NET application here. And it's basically just an items page that, if I had published items to this marketplace, would show what I'd published. And I'm not going to show you all the code behind this. I'm just going to show you the implementation of our marketplace provider. So here we have a WCF service that I've created that implements the marketplace provider service contract. And we've only implemented 2 methods on it: create listings and update listings. And at the very basic level, create listings takes in a list of listings to publish on your marketplace. And again, these are in the specific model that you've defined with our service. They include your custom attributes and any of the mappings you've defined as a marketplace provider. So we're going to take each of those listings, create an item just to put this into the database for Tailspin Toys, the website. And then we're going to iterate over a field selection. And there's one field selection for each attribute that I've set on the listings object here. So I'm going to iterate over the field selection and call a helper method here, which updates that listing on the item. So it takes on in the listing and updates that attribute on the item as well. And then I'm just going to insert that into the database. So it's very simple, and this logic can be whatever you want it to be. But the purpose is for you to create an item on your marketplace. So I'm already running this code in the background, and I just want to show you how this works. So if I go over from the UI again, and I hit Publish, this time to tailspintoys.com. OK, so this is called that marketplace provider I just wrote. And if I move over here, I can see that I've added the items here as well. Great. And it's the same data as before. So the final thing that I want to show is how we can do the same thing from the API in addition to from the UI. So how we can retrieve the list of catalog items and publish a catalog item to a marketplace. And the reason we might want to do this is if I already have an e-commerce solution, and I just want to take advantage of the Dynamics Online connection to eBay, because we provide an abstraction and we make integration simpler. I can just call it the API level to create that listing on eBay instead of having to direct someone to the UI. It allows me to create a better experience and better integration for my customer. So here I've just built a simple client application that does listing. And I have one button here which is going to get the catalog items, similar as we did in our UI, and it will populate this list box right here. We're just going to show a few of the attributes. And then there's a radio button which I've hard-coded for eBay or Tailspin Toys. And publish item will go ahead and publish that item. So here's the implementation of that get items button. So it's a SOAP service, and it might look like there's a lot of code, but we're used to dealing with SOAP services, so this is what we have. We instantiate a read catalog items request, which is the request message there. And I'm just setting the header, which contains the authentication data. And then we're using a concept we defined called read criteria. And read criteria allows me to restrict the set of entities that I return. It's like the where clause in SQL. So in this case, I'm just going to restrict to return all items from the master catalog. And then the concept of field selections applies again. In this case, not part of the marketplace provider implementation, but something I can invoke on the API. And the field selections, much like the select part of a SQL query, allows me to specify which attributes I want to return. And in this case, I specified about 10 that I just want to display in the UI. Then I go ahead and call read catalog items on our client stub, which I've just generated, and then take the response and populate that into the list box. So that was the get catalog items button. And then briefly, let's just look at the publish item button here. And it's pretty simple. In this case, I'm retrieving the item that was selected in the list box and creating another request. In this case, it's for publish catalog items. Setting the request header again. And then I'm providing a few different pieces of information here. The catalog and catalog item IDs define which items I want to publish to the marketplace. And then the online store is just the identifier of that marketplace. Now, the reason it's called online store is because we have the ability to create more than one store per marketplace provider. So it's just a lower level. We then invoke publish catalog items and read the response. OK, so let's just hit F5 here. We're just going to fire up this application and just show you how we can do the same thing here. So I'm going to call get catalog items. And this time, I'll just publish the ball set to eBay. OK. And then if we go back to our eBay site over here, and hit F5. Oh, wants me to sign in again. Just in case you're wondering, I'm going against eBay's sandbox environment, so I'm not creating any actual auctions here. Oh. We'll just try this once more. I think sometimes, oh, OK. See, this is it's redirected me to actually to the production sign in here. Let's just do this the old-fashioned way. OK. Oops. Excellent. OK. So there's our last item that we just listed there. So as you can see through the API, I was able to create a listing on a marketplace independent of the operations involved in creating that listing and independent of the data involved. So just so you know, under the covers, I couldn't have actually made that call directly to eBay. I couldn't have created multiple listings because they require you to use one operation call for each listing you publish on eBay. So through our API, we've provided that higher level abstraction so you don't need to worry about all the details of communicating with eBay. And again, if eBay isn't available, we have retry logic to go off and publish that again at a later time. So with that said, I want to switch back to the slides here and look at another part of the process for creating an e-commerce solution. Just coming back to the diagram again, we looked at the initial interaction with the customer, which is the creating of a listing that they would see, either on a web store like tailspintoys.com or on eBay. But there's another interaction with the customer around collecting their payment, and this is the checkout process. So as part of the checkout process, ultimately, we need to collect a credit card number or some other payment instrument from the customer. And if I'm building a solution, I need to think about, well, how do I securely collect that credit card number? Right? How do I authorize that, probably using the same merchant account as the company is using in their ERP system? And third of all, how do I create an order and reflect that status as paid in the ERP system as well? And there are a number of security concerns around this, and many people who build e-commerce solutions would rather just not deal with this. So we have two solutions in Dynamics Online that help out with this, and they kind of span the three different areas of the payments lifecycle: the provisioning, the transaction processing, and the management. So provisioning refers to setting up a company to use a particular merchant account with a payment processor and ultimately with Dynamics Online. And there we provide a provisioning UI, which accepts this information and takes care of the setup on the back end with the payment processor. The transaction processing part, which is the most interesting thing for developers here and what we'll focus on today, we have a payment API. And that's another simple set of CRUD operations, this time on a payment entity. And creating a payment transaction allows you to go off and authorize or capture a particular credit card. But on top of that, we built an end-to-end solution for a shopping cart. And this takes away the need for a developer to even think about implementing things such as secure credit card collection or the processing on the back end. And we use the payment API underneath that to do the actual transaction processing. And third of all, we have a management UI, which you can use to show the status of all your transactions from the web as well. So I just want to look at a little bit of more details about our payment API and what sorts of transactions we support there. So we support the major credit cards, Visa, Amex, MasterCard, and Discover. And we've been using this API in a variety of ERP systems already. So AX and AX and Office Accounting, you can use those right now with our payment processing API. Under the covers, we have two providers: Chase Payment Tech, which actually, according to November 1st, would be First Data, and PayPal. The PayPal functionality we offer is what was the old VeriSign. So it's an aggregator of different merchant banks. And through our API, you can call create payment transaction and use that to separately create an authorization and a capture. And just a little bit about terminology here. So imagine you go to a restaurant, and imagine you pay for dinner with a credit card. When the waitress goes back and swipes your credit card the first time, they're doing an authorization, probably for 125% of your meal amount. Then you go and you sign it, and at the end of the day, they take all those credit slips and they capture those. So the authorization is a hold on the funds, and the capture is actually the collection of that amount. And the reason we separate these in our API is so that you can go ahead and implement an authorization that happens online in your e-commerce solution. So for example, when the customer actually checks out, you do the authorization. And then you do the capture on the back end when you ship the products. This is actually a regulatory requirement in a few different states, so it's something that we support as well. And our create payment transaction operation, as I mentioned, can be linked to other transactions. So you can create a capture transaction and link that to a previous authorization. What this means for you is that you don't need to store the credit card number in between those two calls to us. And this is very important, because if you integrated with directly with some payment processors, you would have to store that information. And that means that you need to store it securely. So let's take a brief look at just some of the code for how I would do the authorization and then the capture. So again, familiar sort of SOAP request here. I go ahead and create a payment transaction, and I'm setting a few fields on it. In this case, the transaction amount, an external reference ID, which is an invoice number I can use, the action I want to perform, which is an authorize, and then the tender, which I've pulled out into a helper method, which would just take the credit card number, the expiry date, the customer's name, perhaps the CCV. And then I go ahead and call that, and I get back an authorization response. And that authorization response contains a GUID for this transaction that you can use later to do that capture. So here I just show that capture request. And we just set the authorization transaction GUID, and we call our service. And we're going to do the capture there. I've omitted a few details around authentication, but this is the crux of what you'd have to do. But really, we think if you're building an e-commerce solution, the shopping cart is a much more compelling way to integrate. And our design goals for the shopping cart were that we wanted to provide a secure customer payment collection experience, so that as a solution builder, you didn't need to worry about the security. We do simple shipping and tax calculation. And by this, I mean very simple, like fixed rates. And we would also integrate with the ERP order processing engine. So when you finish a checkout through our shopping cart, we go ahead and create the order in the ERP system through Dynamics Online. And there are two API operations here. There's a create cart operation and a checkout operation. First one creates a list of items that you want to check out with. And the checkout hands that off to us to walk the customer through the checkout process. And there's an additional callback for notification afterwards. So here's what the interaction looks like. We see the customer, Tailspin Toys, our service, and the payment processor on the right-hand side. So we implement secure payment processing within our service. It's PCI compliant, so you don't need to worry about that. But what happens first here is the customer calls through the checkout operation, right? So sorry, I should say the customer goes to a checkout page on your website. This is, for example, they click checkout on your website. Then your solution calls create cart on our service with the items that the customer has purchased. And then we return back a URL. And this is a URL that the customer is redirected to. So that's number 3 up there, the redirect. So we redirect them to UI that we serve, which collects their payment information and allows them to review their order and provide shipping options. So once they've entered that information, we go ahead and do the authorization, and we can provide you an optional notification. So after having seen that, I just want to do a demo of what it would take to integrate that with Dynamics Online for the website we're building here, tailspintoys.com. So I'm going to go back to our laptop. OK, great. So we have the Tailspin Toys website here again. And you'll see that I have a Buy Now button here. And the Buy Now button will go and call our shopping cart service and purchase just this one item. I could create a cart of more items, but I'm just going to do it for this one. So the basic code here is for the Buy Now button. And what we do is we're just going to parse the item ID out of the request. We're going to read our item from the database there. And then I have a helper method which takes this item and basically puts it into a cart. So it creates a cart object and creates an item inside that cart. So then we're going to instantiate our checkout service again. And merchant identity is, again, this authorization data that I've put into a helper function. And we go ahead and we call create cart. And in this case, we're passing in the cart, and it's going to create that in our system. So we store the cart after that point. Then we use a series of these checkout options. The shop more URL is where we redirect the user after the checkout process is complete. So they go through, they purchase their item, we redirect them to the shop more URL, and then we call you with the notification. And I'm also just creating some sample shipping methods here. And the shipping methods are a basic list of the options that you offer and the pricing for those. So then I call the checkout, and what I get back from that is the checkout URL. And this URL is what I redirect the user to for them to see the checkout experience. So let's take a look at how this works here. So when I click the Buy Now button for, what am I buying here? The laser pointer. So it redirects me to a website that we host. You can see that it's branded for Tailspin Toys, simple branding, but it's something that we host. And it allows us to collect all this information securely. So I'm going to go ahead and enter my information here for my laser pointer that I'm buying. And then I have the option to select both the shipping method and payment details. So I'm going to upgrade to 3-day shipping, one of the options I passed in, and provide my Visa card. So we're running against a test payment gateway here. So if you write down this credit card number, it won't work. I'm sorry. OK. So I'm going to go ahead and submit that. And what's happening behind the scenes here is we're doing the authorization off to the payment processor, and we're creating the order in the ERP system. So if I hit Continue Shopping, we go back to the Shop More URL. Now, the interesting thing is that I can open up Dynamics AX now, and through our ERP connector, we'll synchronize this sales order back down to your ERP system. So I'm going to navigate to the accounts receivable bucket here and open the sales orders. And again, we just have an instant gratification button to download these orders. OK, great. So we've synchronized this order. It's included my customer name. And most importantly, when I open this form, it's linked it to this particular item that I purchased before. OK. So now that we've done that, we've seen the process of using the shopping cart service that we provide to securely collect credit card information from customers and to integrate back with your ERP system for the ordering process. And I could go through this again and go through the ship process, and we would see how that would update the status as well in Dynamics Online. So the order process, as I mentioned, is the fulfillment that happens in the ERP system. We just saw the create order from Dynamics Online come down. And that creation will be replicated again in the ERP system. But there are a number of additional steps that happen only in the ERP system. And there's a lot of business logic that happens here. It's the reserving of inventory quantities, and it's the full fulfillment process. Picking items from a warehouse, packing it into boxes, shipping it, creating an invoice. And with each of these cases, creating the order and creating things in the ERP system also runs that business logic. And if that business logic is run in the ERP system, the results are updated in our entities in Dynamics Online. So as each of these steps happens, the prepare, the ship, or the capture, our synchronization is updating the status. So you could build a solution that showed, for example, the order status to the customer, or generated a notification email when your item had shipped. Rather than show this, that is an extension of essentially the same e-commerce solution, I want to illustrate how we can do something that is not purely related to the e-commerce order process, something that uses the same data to achieve a different sort of goal. So we're going to build something called a promotion engine. And let's say that we're doing this for Tailspin Toys, and what we want to do is we want to find, for people like me that just buy the most popular item out there, right? I just want the hot toy this year for my kid. I want to go out and buy that. We're going to go and find the most popular toy, and we're going to promote that. We're going to put in its item description that it's the most popular toy. So the algorithm here is pretty simple. We'll read the items that were sold in yesterday's orders. So we read the orders for yesterday, find the items that are contained in there. We're going to find the most popular item in all those orders. And then with one operation, we're going to update the descriptions on all the listings on all marketplaces for that order. So this will show both how we can access data about sales orders from your ERP system, but also how we can use our abstraction from marketplace providers to update a listing, in this case the description, on all marketplaces. So we're just going to switch into the demo here. OK. So we showed this little UI before, which allowed us to publish an item. There's another button at the bottom called Promote Top Seller, and that's what we'll walk through here. OK, so there are a number of different operations I'm invoking. First is a read orders request. So instantiate the read orders and set the request header as I did before. We're using the same read criteria mechanism, but instead of filtering based on an ID, we're going to filter based on a last updated date range. And our criteria allow essentially the filtering based on a variety of attributes that we define that we anticipate users would want to filter on here. So we're doing a range filter instead of an equality filter here, as you can see on the right-hand side. And we're going to filter between now and 1 day ago. So this will read all the orders that were placed before now, but after 1 day ago. And we just set this on the read criteria as well. And then we're doing a field selection again. In this case, we just want to read the order line item information, so we can determine what items were contained in that order. So we call read orders, and we get the response, and pull out yesterday's orders from that. I've extracted a method here called find top selling item from orders, and it just implements the functionality of taking the set of orders from yesterday, iterating over the items, building a dictionary of that based on the item, and computing the quantities there. And it returns the top selling item from all of yesterday's orders. Then this is the interesting part around our abstraction, where we're going to read all of the listings. So in this case, we create a read listings request, again the request header, read criteria as we've seen before. But in this case, we're filtering based on the item IDs. So we're going to read all of the listings associated with that top selling item. And again, we set the field selections. So once we've gone ahead and invoked read listings and gotten that response back, we are going to iterate over those listings down here. And what we're doing is we're going to construct a new listing with only the fields we've updated on it. We're going to set the version. And the version is important here because we implement essentially optimistic concurrency for all of our entities, meaning that what you do is you pass in on the update and delete operations a version that you've previously read. And this prevents multiple applications from concurrently editing the same item. And we will throw an error if the version you pass in is not the current version of that particular entity. We pass in the ID, which is essentially the primary key of this entity, what online store you want to update the listing on, and the new description. So we're going to iterate through this once for each existing listing. So for example, once for the listing on eBay, once for on tailspintoys.com, and once for each additional marketplace provider you've done. And we're going to then set the description to the top selling item since yesterday. And then again, we're calling the update listings operation, setting the listings that we want to update. And in this case, field selections is not used to return the fields that the attributes I want to read. It's the attributes I want to update. And then finally, we're setting an operation mode. Our service supports both synchronous and asynchronous invocations with respect to your call. So we can either return you the results right away, or we can give you a handle, essentially an operation ID, that allows you to retrieve the results later. And finally, we're going to go ahead and call that operation right here. And again, we've passed in listings from multiple marketplaces. So what we've done is we've actually called the marketplace provider for Tailspin Toys and the marketplace provider for eBay, perhaps even multiple times. But you make just one call. So let's hit F5 again and just look at this work. Now, I know that the most popular item is the one that we just placed an order for. And that was the red laser pointer, if I believe. So if I promote top seller, it's going to run through all of the orders from yesterday and ultimately promote the red laser pointer. So we've run through that code there, and we've updated the listings. So if I switch back to my laser pointer here, and we see the previous description, I'm going to hit F5. OK, and we see that it's updated that to be the top selling item since yesterday. Then if we go back to eBay, we can see again the laser pointer here. And if we go and look at it, and look at the description down here, OK, we've also updated the description on eBay to say that it's the top selling item yesterday. So this demo has shown how we can manipulate data from the ERP system. Remember, we read all of the orders from yesterday and found the items that were contained within them. So we read all the ERP data using the Dynamics Online API. And we also used our marketplace abstraction to update the description of listings on particular marketplaces, all through one API operation. So there are just a few more concepts I want to cover first. The first is, I talked a little bit about customization before in the context of a marketplace provider defining custom attributes for their listings. But really, we have customization throughout our API here. You can attach custom attributes to any entity in our system, to a sales order, to a catalog item, to a listing. And this is defined through one of the descriptors I described, a custom attribute descriptor. And this is a piece of metadata that describes the XML type of the attribute you're defining, any mappings that are associated with that. And these are dependent upon the entity you're describing it on. So we talked about listings before and how a custom attribute was used as part of published catalog items. So you could define a mapping for the published catalog items operation that specifies how that value gets set when you call that operation. And it can include additional rendering information that allows us to show it up in the different pieces of our UI that we have. And finally, the usage, the cardinality of the attribute. So by defining custom attributes, you're able to extend the Dynamics Online API and use it for more complex marketplace providers, but also use it as a way to attach information to these entities and move them between the ERP system and the cloud. Final thing I want to describe here is where we've come from as a Dynamics Online team and where we're going with this API. This is very, very early for us. We're looking at releasing in 2009 with a beta that can be used by developers. And I want you to understand what we thought about in terms of the breadth of our services. So at the very high level, as a team, we've built services that integrate with ERP systems: commerce services, financial services, and marketing services. Some of these are exposed through the Dynamics Online API now. And the idea is that we'll expose more and more through an API in addition to what's already available in your ERP system. So we talked about, in commerce, the web catalog management, the order management, the shopping cart, and calculations, backed by providers that we ship out of the box. In this case, eBay is the one that we have and are ready to announce now. We hope that third-party app solution builders would want to integrate additional providers for commerce services to expose your marketplace through Dynamics Online. We showed the payments part of financial services today. And there are additional pieces that we are building through ERP systems that will also be exposed through the API around invoicing and taxation and treasury. And as I mentioned, the two providers we have for that are Chase and PayPal. This supports a wide variety of different merchant banks that customers might want to use. And they can use all of those through Dynamics Online, both in their ERP application and through our API. And finally, marketing services is something, as a team, that we've integrated into CRM Online. And the premise here, since we haven't discussed it, is that you can create search engine marketing campaigns in an abstract way and have them exist on different search engine providers. Right now, we've integrated with Microsoft's Ad Center product. And this allows you to create ads on Ad Center. But we'll also grow this list of providers as well. A second thing that's interesting to developers is the landing pages. And this is essentially a lead collection mechanism that you can use as well. We host a simple page which is described dynamically in terms of the attributes that you want to collect from customers. So it includes, say, contact information and a name and perhaps what they're interested in. And we'll host that, collect that customer information, and then store it in CRM Online. So in terms of the ERP systems that we connect with, right now it's Microsoft Dynamics AX. But the goal and the scope of our vision is to include ERP connectors for the broad range of Microsoft Dynamics products. As I mentioned, we already integrate with CRM for some of our functionality around search engine marketing, and we'll grow the functionality and the integration with ERP providers over time. So with that said, I just want to summarize a little bit of what we've described today. We've talked about the key benefits of the Dynamics Online API, which are to allow you to easily access ERP data. Sales orders, customers, items that you sell. And you can access them and update that data and have it synchronized between your ERP system and the cloud. Secondly, you can participate in business processes. By creating a sales order, you are kicking off a fulfillment process in the ERP system. And third of all, one of the key benefits for someone that implements already one of these marketplaces or one of these payment processors is that you can implement a provider that integrates with Dynamics Online, and you'll be exposed both through our UI and through the ERP client applications that use our UI. So I'd like to highlight again that this is very early in terms of our development for this, and in 2009, we'll be able to release a beta of this service for developers to integrate against. So I'd like to thank you again for your time, and I'd be happy to take any questions. But before that, I'm supposed to remind you of one thing. So the session recordings and the evals are both at microsoftpdc.com. I'd be happy if you'd fill those out. And now I'd be happy to take any questions. And I think just so we can all hear, if you could use the mic, that would be excellent. Great. Thank you.
Will this work in countries other than the United States, like Canada?
So our initial release is for the United States. But as with services we've released before, we do intend to make them available outside of the United States. So the first release is the United States, and after that, we'll grow it globally.
Will Microsoft provide APIs for integrating with third-party ERP software that are not designed by Microsoft?
So no, that's not our intention is not to build those ERP connectors through Dynamics Online. And really the goal of Dynamics Online is to extend the functionality of the Dynamics ERP products to the cloud. And so we work very closely with the particular product teams for the ERP systems to ensure that our functionality matches theirs. And we just don't have that same level of integration with other third-party ERP systems.
Thank you.
Great. OK, well, thank you very much.